There's something about the first day of school that always gives me a buzz. The air carries a different charge. Maybe it's the scent of new books and polished floors. Maybe it's the nervous energy pulsing through the hallways. As a history teacher, I've done this enough times to know the rhythm, but this year, something felt different. Maybe it was just me. I stood at my classroom window, watching students flood in through the front entrance like ants breaking formation, finding their paths. Some familiar faces, some new. A little thrill of purpose lit in my chest. I loved this job. Always had. Helping kids find perspective through the past gave me meaning. It made me feel like I was part of something bigger than myself. And then she walked by. Emily, my wife. Even after 10 years, she still made me pause. Her soft brown hair pulled into that loose twist she did when she didn't want to try too hard but still looked incredible. A cream blouse tucked neatly into a high-waisted skirt that hugged just enough to hint at her curves. That laugh, sharp and musical, floated into the hall from just beyond the teacher's lounge. She wasn't alone. Jake was with her. The ever-charming, ever-tan PE teacher with his sculpted jawline and sleeves rolled just enough to show off those gym-built forearms. He leaned a little too close to Emily, and she leaned back in a way that looked casual, but wasn't. I watched the way her hand grazed his arm just for a second too long, and I felt it. That first seed of doubt. Tiny, but sharp. Don't be paranoid, I told myself. They work together. It's just friendly. Still, I didn't look away. Morning, Mr. Ellis. A voice chirped at my door. I blinked and turned. Kylie Simmons, senior, always eager and painfully bright. Morning, Kylie, I said, putting on a smile. Ready to conquer world history? She grinned. More ready than I am for calculus. I chuckled and let her in, watching the rest of the students trickle in. The hum of conversation returned the rhythm I knew. But my mind still lingered in that hallway, picturing Jake's fingers brushing Emily's wrist. By lunch, I'd almost forgotten about it. Almost. The staff room was its usual blend of microwaved leftovers and passive-aggressive fridge notes. I slid into the seat beside Emily. She looked up from her salad and smiled. Hey, you, she said, her voice smooth as ever. How's your first day going? Not bad, I said, stealing a grape from her Tupperware. Sophomores haven't declared open rebellion yet. You. She shrugged. Kids are chatty, but good. Jake plopped into the seat across from us, his tray loaded with chicken tenders and a ridiculous amount of ketchup. Emily, you weren't kidding about your husband being a thief, he said with a smirk. Grapes now? Emily laughed. He's shameless. I forced a chuckle, but something about the way she looked at him, like he was the sun and she was trying not to squint. He bit into a tender, licking a smear of ketchup from his thumb. I looked down at my sandwich, my appetite fading. Claire walked in then. Jake's wife. Quiet, graceful. She carried a sketch pad tucked under her arm and wore that distant, thoughtful look she always had. She nodded politely at us and took a seat at the far end of the table, flipping open her sketchbook, disappearing into her own world. Like she always did. But she didn't glance at Jake. Not once. After school, Emily and I drove home in our separate cars, something we started doing a few years ago when our schedules never quite lined up. I pulled into the driveway second. Her car was already there, but she wasn't in the kitchen. I found her upstairs, changing out of her work clothes. You want to do Thai tonight? I asked from the doorway. She turned, caught mid-button on her blouse. I already promised Jess I'd grab drinks. It's her birthday. I hesitated. Oh, you didn't mention that. She shrugged, sliding a loose sweater over her shoulders. I thought I did. You didn't. Silence stretched between us. She grabbed her purse, not looking me in the eyes. I won't be late. I nodded, even though my chest tightened. As she passed, I caught a whiff of her perfume, jasmine, and something deeper. She wore that scent when she wanted to be noticed. That night, I sat on the couch with a cold beer and an older episode of The West Wing playing low. Emily didn't come home until well after midnight. I pretended to be asleep when she slipped into bed beside me, but I heard her phone buzz. Twice. She silenced it quickly. Lying there in the dark, I couldn't help it. I pictured Jake, his hand brushing her back, her head tilted back in laughter. I wanted to shake the image. I didn't. The next few weeks slipped by with an unnerving rhythm. On the surface, things seemed normal: classroom lectures, lesson planning, staff meetings, but underneath, I was constantly watching, listening, measuring the distance between Emily and Jake every time they shared space. At home, things were strange. Emily had always been warm, touchy, not overly affectionate, but present. She'd reach for my hand while we watched TV, rest her foot against mine in bed, kiss my cheek just because. But now, her touches were careful, deliberate, almost obligatory, and the excuses started. Late meetings, grade-level planning sessions, a new book club she'd supposedly joined with a few of the younger teachers, nights when she came home too tired to talk, makeup somehow still perfectly intact. One Thursday, I came home early. I was grading essays when I heard her car pull up. The door opened, and I waited. No greeting, no hello, just the sound of heels clicking through the hallway, a bag being set down, and the telltale creak of the stairs as she hurried up. I followed. Emily was in our room, her blouse half unbuttoned, standing in front of the mirror with a look I couldn't quite place. Not guilt, not fear, just detachment, like I'd walked in on someone else's life. "Hey," I said casually, leaning against the doorframe. "You're home early for a Thursday." She jumped slightly, turning toward me. "Oh, yeah. The meeting got canceled last minute. Figured I'd take the night off." I stepped forward. "You look nice." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks. Just felt like dressing up today." "For a staff meeting?" I didn't say it out loud. Instead, I moved closer and slipped my arms around her waist. Her body stiffened, just for a second. Then she softened, leaned into me. But there was no warmth behind it. No hunger. Just routine. We hadn't had sex in almost 3 weeks. It wasn't like her. Normally, we were good, not wild, not insatiable, but consistent. Comfortable. But now, I'd wake up to the cool side of the bed more often than not. She always claimed she was tired. Headache. Cramps. Stress. All the usual lines, delivered with the subtle, quiet finality of someone hoping I wouldn't question it too hard. I started to question everything. And then came the first real crack. It was a Monday morning. I was grabbing copies from the lounge printer when I saw them, Emily and Jake, standing by the vending machine. She was laughing at something he'd said, one hand resting lightly on his arm. The kind of laugh you reserve for someone you're flirting with. The kind that starts in your chest and makes its way to your eyes. They didn't see me right away. Jake's hand drifted to the small of her back. Just for a second. A blink and you'd miss it kind of moment. But I didn't blink. And then they noticed me. Jake straightened up immediately, a broad grin on his face. "Hey man, you catch the Broncos game yesterday?" "Yeah," I said flatly. "Hell of a comeback." Emily looked between us, her smile faltering. "We were just talking about it," she added quickly. I nodded, grabbed my copies, and left without another word. At lunch that day, Claire wasn't at her usual table in the art wing. Odd. She never missed her quiet lunchtime sketches, unless she had a meeting or was out sick. I thought about her, about the way she always seemed just out of reach, like someone hiding in plain sight. That afternoon, I passed her in the hallway. She looked withdrawn, pale. Her smile barely formed. I almost asked if she was okay. I didn't. The next evening, Emily said she was staying late to help organize the book fair with some other English teachers. I decided to stop by the school on my way home, figured I'd surprise her. Maybe bring her coffee, maybe find a way to remind her that I was still here, still trying. But when I got there, her car wasn't in the lot. I waited in mine for a few minutes, scanning the other vehicles. Jake's truck was there. I walked the hall slowly, ears tuned to every creak and echo. The library was dark. The classrooms were empty. Eventually, I heard voices coming from behind the gym, faint, laughing familiar. I crept closer. And there they were. Jake and Emily, standing close outside the athletic storage room, half silhouetted by the fading daylight. I couldn't hear what he said, but whatever it was made her laugh again, covering her mouth like a teenager. He leaned in. My stomach churned. But just as I stepped around the corner, Emily took a step back, her expression sobering. Okay, she said, her voice low but firm. "I really have to go." Jake's smile lingered. "Rain check." She didn't answer. She just walked away, brushing past me before she realized I was there. "Oh, hey," she said, startled. "What are you doing here?" "Thought I'd bring you coffee," I said, holding up the to-go cup. "You said you were helping with the book fair." Her eyes flicked toward Jake, then back to me. "Oh, yeah, that ran late, and then Jake needed help moving some stuff." I looked at the two of them. Her cheeks were flushed. His hair was tousled. My mind filled in the blanks. "Of course," I said quietly. "Always happy to help." That night, she was quiet at dinner. We didn't talk much. She scrolled through her phone, smiling at whatever lit up her screen, and I sat across from her, sipping my drink, wondering if she was texting him. When we got into bed, she turned her back to me. and I laid awake staring at the ceiling, feeling the cracks forming beneath everything we built. There's something about teachers. They're supposed to be experts at keeping secrets, but in reality, a high school staff room is one of the loudest echo chambers I've ever been in. Everything gets around. Everything. Especially when it's juicy. The first time I caught it, it was just a murmur behind a coffee mug. Mr. Langley from science muttering something to Coach Adams about cross-department collaboration with a smirk that didn't quite match his words. I played dumb, staring into my own mug like it held the answers. But I knew exactly who they were talking about. Jake. And Emily. You'd think after over a decade of marriage, I'd be immune to casual workplace flirtation. But this wasn't casual anymore. This was erosion. Silent, slow, but deadly. I could feel it every time Jake slapped someone on the back a little too hard. Every time he dropped a wink into a conversation like a punctuation mark. Emily didn't even try to hide how much she laughed around him anymore. And now, other people were noticing too. Claire was quieter than usual, which is saying something, considering she's never been much of a talker. I passed her in the art hallway one morning. Her class was working on perspective sketches, charcoal dust floating in sunbeams from the tall windows. She stood with her arms folded, staring at a student's half-finished cityscape, but her mind wasn't there. You can see it in the way her fingers tapped her elbow, over and over, like Morse code. She didn't look up when I said hello. But at lunch that Friday, she was sitting alone at the corner of the staff room. Just her, a salad she wasn't eating, and a hardcover sketchbook half filled with stark, dark lines. I hesitated for a second, then crossed the room and sat across from her. She looked up slowly. Hey, I said. Mind if I join you? Claire shrugged, closing the book gently. Sure. There was a long pause between us. Not uncomfortable, exactly. Just tentative. Like we were both waiting for the other to make the first move. So, I finally said, how's the art show coming? Her lips quirked. Coming. The seniors are late on their final pieces, as usual. And I've got a kiln backlog that could fuel a small city. I chuckled, grateful for something normal. Sounds about right. Another beat passed. Then she looked at me, really looked at me for the first time that day. You know, you don't have to pretend. I blinked. Pretend? That you haven't noticed, she said softly. Her eyes dropped to her fork, stabbing a cherry tomato with unnecessary force. Everyone else has. The way Jake and Emily act around each other. It's not subtle. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. It was one thing to suspect it, another to hear it out loud from someone else. I wasn't sure if I was going crazy, I admitted. But no, I've noticed. Claire gave a sad little laugh, one with no humor in it. We both married charmers. Turns out that's not always a good thing. We didn't say anything for a while after that. The hum of the fridge, the dull clink of cutlery, someone microwaving leftover meatloaf across the room, those were the only sounds around us. But under it all, I could feel something shifting between us. A strange, silent alliance. Later that day, I was at my desk trying to finish grading midterms when I heard a quiet knock on the door. Claire stood there, sketchbook still in hand, looking unsure. Got a second? She asked. Yeah, of course. She stepped in, closing the door behind her. For a moment, she hovered near the windows, chewing on her bottom lip. I didn't come to stir anything up, she said. But, if you ever need to talk, someone who gets it, I'm around. Okay. I swallowed, then nodded. Thanks, Claire. That means more than you probably realize. She hesitated a second longer, then turned and left. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Emily, listening to her slow, steady breathing. Her body curled away from mine, her warmth a distant thing. I stared at the ceiling and thought about Claire's words, her presence, the quiet solidarity in her eyes. I thought about Jake's hand on Emily's back, her smile, her sudden urge to wear lipstick again after 5 years of not bothering. I thought about how she'd started locking her phone when she never used to care. And worst of all, I thought about how easily she slept beside me now, like she had nothing to hide. The next day, I walked into the staff room and caught the tail end of a whispered conversation. 2 new teachers, laughing too hard at something they refused to explain. When they noticed me, they fell silent, shifted awkwardly. I just smiled and poured my coffee. Let them whisper. Let them see. Whatever was happening with Jake and Emily, it wasn't just mine to carry anymore. Parent-teacher night always had this nervous buzz to it, like a school play where no one had rehearsed. Students scrubbed the halls clean of evidence, teachers polished their charm, and parents arrived in waves, holding coffees, clutching schedules. their eyes scanning nameplates like they were hunting for answers. I usually didn't mind it. I liked meeting the people behind the kids. You could learn a lot about a student by watching how their mother smiled, how their father crossed his arms when you brought up missing homework. But that night, all I could think about was the way Emily hadn't even looked at me all day. We passed in the hallway once. She was wearing this burgundy dress I'd never seen before, with a slit that showed just enough thigh to make me pause. She didn't notice me staring. Her eyes were locked on Jake, who was helping a freshman dad find the gym. She laughed at something he said. That laugh again. Claire was setting up across the hall. Her art displays always looked like mini galleries, student sketches clipped to wire frames, ceramics laid out on velvet cloth, a small stack of postcards advertising the spring show. She worked with this quiet focus, like everything had to be placed just right or it would all fall apart. I stopped by her door as the clock ticked towards 6. Need a hand? I asked. She looked up, a little startled. Then she smiled. Only if you're good at balancing clay dragons. I stepped in, picking up one that had lost a wing. This guy's seen better days. Claire smirked. He's a metaphor. Resilience. We both laughed, and for a moment it felt like something inside my chest unclenched. It was the first time in weeks I'd felt something other than dread. I wanted to stay in that room longer than I should have. The night passed in a blur. Parents cycled through, asked the usual questions, made the same nervous jokes. I went through the motions, but I wasn't really there. Not fully. It wasn't until close to 8, just as the last wave of parents were filtering out, that it happened. I was at the water fountain outside the main office when I heard footsteps and low voices. I turned instinctively, and there they were. Jake and Emily. He was leaning close. Too close. Her hand was on his chest, and his fingers brushed the inside of her arm. It was quick, barely a second, but the way her face looked up at him, eyes soft, lips slightly parted. It felt like a punch. They didn't see me, but Claire did. She was down the hallway, watching too, holding a stack of portfolios like she'd frozen mid-step. Her eyes weren't angry. They weren't even surprised. Just tired. Like this was the confirmation she didn't need, but already knew. She walked up beside me a moment later. I saw it too, she said quietly. I didn't say anything. You okay? She asked. I forced a breath. Not really. Come on, she said. You're coming with me. We ended up at her place. Not intentionally, it just happened. I offered to carry some boxes she needed to bring home from her room, and before I knew it, I was sitting on her back porch, a glass of wine in my hand, her dog curled up at my feet. It was quiet out there. Just the hum of crickets and the occasional far-off car. Claire had changed into a loose sweater and yoga pants, hair pulled up in a messy knot. She looked real, unfiltered, and somehow even more beautiful for it. I hate him, she said, her voice small. I'm trying to figure out if I hate her, I replied. Claire stared into her wine. I used to think I wasn't enough. That maybe if I was more exciting, more affectionate, more something, he'd come back to me. But he never really left me. He just drifted toward whatever gave him that little dopamine hit. Same with Emily, I said. She always said I was her safe place. Her still water. Maybe she wanted waves. Claire gave me this look, soft, almost aching. Then she reached out and touched my hand. It was small, just a graze of fingers, but everything inside me stirred. Not just from the wine, or the night, or the grief we were both drowning in. It was her. She didn't let go. I should go, I said, even as my hand closed around hers. Yeah, she said, but she didn't move. There was a moment, a long, fragile moment, where our eyes met and I could feel it. The heat, the ache, the temptation pulling us together like gravity. My thumb brushed the inside of her wrist. Her breath caught. But we didn't kiss. Not yet. Instead, we sat in silence, two people on the edge of something neither of us could name. Bound by betrayal. Held together by the one thread they didn't see coming. Us. It happened on a Tuesday. Of course it did. Tuesdays always feel like the worst day of the week. No one expects disaster on a Tuesday. But there I was, sitting at my desk, pretending to focus on papers while the words blurred and blurred until I just gave up. I'd rehearsed the confrontation in my head 100 different ways. Sometimes I played it calm and collected. Other times I imagined myself slamming doors, raising my voice, throwing every ugly word I could find like grenades. But when Emily walked through the front door that evening, it wasn't rage that hit me. It was something quieter. A hollow ache that started in my chest and stretched out until even breathing felt like effort. She was humming. She stopped when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table. Her eyes narrowed slightly, like I was out of place in my own house. "You're home early," she said. "Didn't feel like staying late today," I replied. "How was your day?" She dropped her bag on the counter, slower than usual. "Fine. Nothing exciting." That was it. That was the lie that broke it. "Really?" I asked. "Nothing at all?" She glanced up at me, something flickering behind her eyes. "Why do you say it like that?" "Because I saw you," I said. "With Jake. Last week. Outside the gym. And again during parent-teacher night. I've seen how you look at him. How he looks at you." Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "Are you sleeping with him?" I asked. There it was. The question that couldn't be taken back. Emily's lips parted, her eyes brimming with something that might have been guilt or defiance. She shook her head. "No, I'm not." "But you want to," I said. "Don't you?" Silence. She sat down across from me, arms crossed like she was holding herself together. "It's not that simple." "It's actually very simple," I said. "You're either loyal or you're not. You either come home to me, or you've already left." Her chin trembled, and for a second, I saw the woman I married, the one who used to crawl into bed and fall asleep wrapped around me like I was the safest place in the world. But she didn't reach for me now. "I didn't plan it," she whispered. "Do you love him?" "No," she said quickly. Too quickly. "It's not like that." "Then what is it, Emily? Because I sure as hell don't recognize you anymore." Her voice rose suddenly, desperate. "I don't know. Okay? I don't know what I feel. I feel seen with him. Desired. Not like I'm just your habit." That one cut deep. "I've never treated you like a habit," I said quietly. "You're my wife. I gave you everything." "I didn't ask for everything," she snapped. "I just wanted to feel alive again." The room went still. I stood, slowly. "Then I hope it was worth it." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked down at her hands, picking at her thumbnail like it might undo the last 6 months of her life. I walked out. The next day at school, you could feel it. The shift. Emily didn't sit near me in the staff room. Jake was unusually quiet during lunch, barely lifting his eyes from his protein bar. Conversations dulled when either of us walked in. A few brave souls, like Ms. Franklin from admin, offered sympathetic smiles. Most just avoided eye contact. But Claire? Claire met me in the courtyard during lunch, like it was already decided. We sat under the old oak, her sketchpad open beside her, untouched. "Did you do it?" she asked. I nodded. "And?" She denied it. But she didn't have to say it out loud. Claire reached for my hand without a word. We sat like that for a while, two people adrift but holding on. That weekend, we started eating lunch together. Nothing scandalous, just quiet conversations, shared glances, an occasional brush of fingertips when we reached for the same thermos. The walls around us cracked in the softest ways. It wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about something else. Something forming in the ashes of what we'd both lost. The weekend trip was one of those well-meaning school traditions no one wanted to organize, but everyone pretended to love. A joint venture between the history and art departments, cultural immersion for the juniors. Museums, walking tours, guest lectures. Claire and I were selected to chaperone, along with a few others. But by Saturday night, it was just us. The kids had been corralled into their hotel rooms by 9:30, most of them too exhausted to sneak out. I did the last hallway check, exchanged nods with the exhausted vice principal 2 floors down, then ducked back into the lounge just off the lobby. Claire was already there, her shoes kicked off, hair damp from a shower, sleeves rolled up on an old hoodie. She looked so unlike the composed art teacher I saw each day. She looked real. "You made it," she said, offering me a glass of something dark and red. "Barely," I smiled. 2 of the boys tried to barter room service for freedom. Claire laughed, her voice low and warm. "Do you remember being that young? Feels like a lifetime ago." There was a long pause. A comfortable one. The kind that settles between people who no longer feel the need to fill silence with noise. She tucked her legs beneath her and curled into the corner of the couch. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked. I glanced at her. Think about what? The moment everything changed. My throat went tight. All the time. I don't know when Jake stopped being my husband and started being a stranger who occasionally borrowed my towels, she said, her voice distant. But I know the moment I stopped trying to fix it. I looked at her. She looked at me. And suddenly, there was no more noise. Just the hum of the vending machine, the pulse in my ears, the way her eyes found mine like she'd been waiting all night for me to see her, not just glance, not just sympathize, but see her. "Claire." "Don't," she whispered. Not unless you mean it. She was close. So close I could feel the warmth of her breath, smell the faint floral hint of her shampoo. My hand brushed against hers, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in slowly, carefully, like we were stepping onto a frozen lake that might crack beneath us. And then it happened. We kissed. God, it was nothing like Emily. Claire tasted like Cabernet and unanswered prayers. Her lips moved with a need that matched mine, urgent but uncertain, like we were both desperate to feel something that wasn't betrayal, something that was ours. Her hand slid into my hair, and I pulled her closer. The kiss deepened, grew. We forgot the couch, forgot the job, forgot the people who had made us feel invisible for so long. But just when the weight of it started to pull us under, Claire broke away. We can't, she breathed, her forehead pressed to mine. Not like this. I nodded, chest rising fast, heart pounding like a war drum. I know. She backed away, curling her legs up tighter, pulling her hoodie around herself like armor. This doesn't fix anything. No, I said, but it felt like something. She stared down into her glass. It felt like drowning and breathing at the same time. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of guilt, but because I couldn't stop replaying it. The way she looked at me. The way her mouth had searched for mine. The way her body had melted into my arms like she'd been waiting for someone to hold her right for years. In the morning, we didn't speak about it. We sipped coffee side by side in the hotel lobby while the students gathered in sleepy clusters. We exchanged glances but no words. The air between us felt fragile. Electric. By the time we got back to school, Monday morning had smoothed over most of the edges. But the change was there. I saw it in the way Claire lingered just a second longer in the hallway. The way her hand brushed mine when we passed too close. The way she smiled, not politely, but like she remembered every inch of my mouth. We both knew it couldn't happen again. We said as much. But we were lying to ourselves. Because something had started. And it wasn't going away. Jake found out on a Wednesday. I don't know how. Maybe someone saw something. Maybe Emily talked. Maybe Claire slipped. But that morning, when I stepped into the staff room to grab coffee, he was already there, sitting at the table like a loaded weapon. He didn't even look at me. Just kept clicking his pen fast, rhythmic, like he needed something to keep his fist from doing the talking. Emily stood near the counter, arms crossed, pretending to read a memo posted weeks ago. Her eyes flicked between me and Jake, lips tight, jaw locked. Claire walked in behind me, froze, then slowly backed out again without a word. Jake stood, and that's when the room went dead silent. He walked toward me, slow and heavy-footed like he was crossing a field to bury something. You kissed my wife, he said. Not loud. Just flat. Controlled. Which somehow made it worse. I did, I said. No point in lying now. But you don't get to act surprised. That did it. He moved like he was going to swing, but Coach Adams stepped between us before it could happen. Not here, he growled, gripping Jake's arm. Not in front of the damn vending machine. Jake's eyes didn't leave mine. You think because I made a mistake, you get to sleep with Claire and play the noble one? I didn't sleep with her, I snapped. But God, don't tempt me. At least she still knows what it means to care about someone. His face twisted, eyes darkening. You think you're better than me? I know I'm better than you, I said, low and sharp. Because I didn't sneak around pretending this was some harmless flirtation. I looked Claire in the eyes and saw a woman who'd been forgotten, just like me. Jake shoved past Coach Adams, face flushed. You'll regret this. But he didn't swing. He just left. The room exhaled. Emily stayed by the counter, watching me with a look I hadn't seen before. Pity mixed with something sharper. Bitterness. Maybe even hate. You couldn't wait, could you? She said under her breath. You just had to go find a shoulder to cry on. You already left, Emily. You just didn't pack a suitcase. She scoffed and walked out. By lunch, the entire school knew something had happened. Students whispered behind open textbooks. Teachers side-eyed in the hallways. Conversations stopped the second I entered a room. It was like stepping onto a stage where everyone already knew their lines, and I was the villain no one had warned me I was playing. Principal Rayburn called me in during 6th period. He didn't ask for details. Didn't want them. I don't care who kissed who, he said, fingers steepled over his desk. But the tension in this school is bleeding into classrooms. The students are starting to notice. I understand. Do you? He asked, eyes narrowing. Because if there's one more whisper, I'll be forced to intervene officially. You're a good teacher, but you're not indispensable. None of us are. That night, Claire called. Jake's moving out, she said quietly. I'm sorry. Don't be, she replied. It should have happened a long time ago. There was a long pause between us. I don't regret the kiss, she said. Neither do I. But we can't pretend this isn't complicated now. I know, I said. But I also know I want to see you again. Silence. Then, tomorrow night? Yes. After we hung up, I sat in the dark of the living room, thinking about the ruins we were all standing in. Emily had packed a few bags, said she was staying with her sister. There was no shouting, no begging, just a quiet, tired retreat. I didn't follow her, didn't stop her, didn't want to. The fallout had finally hit. And strangely, I felt free. Not happy, not healed, but free. Like the moment after a storm when you step outside and everything's wet and broken, but the air is finally clear. They say time heals all wounds, but I think that's a lie we tell ourselves when we don't know what else to say. It wasn't time that started healing me. It was Claire. She texted me the next day. Coffee. I hesitated for a full hour before replying. Yes. We met at a tucked-away cafe just outside town where no one would recognize us. She wore a black turtleneck, minimal makeup, her hair pulled into a low twist. I thought I'd never seen anyone look so quietly beautiful. I wanted to say it out loud. I didn't. She already knew. We didn't talk about Emily or Jake that day. We just talked. About music. About how we both used to read more before our lives became grading and lesson plans. About how she still had every sketch she'd ever drawn since she was 12. About how I still had a guitar in my closet I hadn't played since our 3rd anniversary. She smiled when I told her that. Play for me sometime, she said. The second coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into another night of sitting in her living room, not watching the movie we claimed to be watching. She fell asleep against my shoulder halfway through. I didn't move. Not for an hour. When I finally slipped out, she walked me to the door, barefoot, eyes soft with something I hadn't seen on her face before. Good night, she said. I wanted to kiss her, but I didn't. Not yet. School was still chaos. Jake had requested a transfer. Emily officially moved out. My house echoed in all the wrong ways. I barely slept those first few nights alone, waking up to silence, no footsteps in the hallway, no morning rituals. But then I started sleeping again, because sometimes Claire would call. Sometimes she'd stop by after her evening run, her hair still damp with sweat, cheeks flushed, and she'd sit on my porch with 2 glasses of wine and talk until the stars came out. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic "what are we" conversation, just presence. We were in each other's lives in the kind of quiet, sturdy way you don't realize you need until it's there. One night, 2 weeks after the fallout, I came over with Thai takeout. She'd had a brutal day. One of her seniors had broken down in class after finding out his mom was in the hospital. Claire was shaken by it. She opened the door, eyes red-rimmed, but grateful. Hey, she said, voice raspy. Hey, I replied, lifting the bag. Thought you could use something that didn't come out of a freezer. We didn't make it to dinner. She kissed me the moment I stepped inside. No hesitance. No build-up this time. Just her arms around my neck, her mouth finding mine with a kind of hunger that wasn't just about sex. It was about need. About finally letting go. We didn't rush. We took our time. Clothes came off slowly, hands memorizing skin, lips tracing places we hadn't dared before. We made love like 2 people who knew what it was like to be ignored. 2 people who were aching to feel seen again. It was soft and real. And afterwards, as I laid there with her head on my chest, I realized this wasn't about Emily anymore, or Jake, or revenge. This was about her, about me, about something we'd built out of the wreckage. When I woke the next morning, she was already making coffee, her robe loosely tied, humming some old Joni Mitchell song. She looked over her shoulder and smiled like I'd always been there. Morning. I walked up behind her, wrapped my arms around her waist, and kissed the back of her neck. And for the first time in what felt like years, I believed in something again. Not everything was fixed. We were still the subjects of hallway whispers. Some teachers looked away when they passed me. A few smiled knowingly, as if they'd seen it coming. But none of that mattered anymore. Claire and I had each other. And in a world full of fractured marriages and fake smiles, that felt like something worth holding on to. There's a strange kind of silence that follows destruction. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of peace. Of clarity. Like walking through a burned forest and realizing there's already new growth pushing through the ash. Emily filed for divorce first. The papers came in a flat envelope with our names in bold black ink. No dramatic texts. No tearful calls. Just an email from her lawyer, a signature line, and a dull ache in my chest I didn't expect to feel. Not pain, not regret, just finality. It had been coming for a long time, but when it happened, something inside me finally let go. Claire's process was slower. Jake moved out quietly, taking only what he needed. No court battles, no shouting. Just a gradual separation, like steam rising off a hot road, until one day the air was simply clear. He transferred schools by the end of the month. A different district. Farther out. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew it was to escape the rumors, the stares, the weight of what he'd broken. After that, the tension at school began to lift. People stopped whispering when we entered rooms. Some still watched us, curious. A few seemed genuinely supportive. Coach Adams gave me a clap on the back one morning and muttered, "Took balls to own it, man." Others kept their distance. I didn't blame them. But Claire was something else entirely. She stopped hiding. We started eating lunch in the open, side by side, her sketch pad beside my folder of lesson plans. She'd draw on napkins. I'd correct essays. Our elbows would bump. Our feet would touch beneath the table. And no one said a word. There was a staff party at the end of the year, one of those awkward, we survived another school year gatherings at a local vineyard. I almost didn't go. Claire almost didn't either. But then she texted, "You coming with me, or should we give them something to talk about separately?" So we went together. She wore a dark green dress that hugged her just right. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, lips painted soft red. I watched heads turn as we walked in hand, and for once, I didn't feel shame. I felt proud. Like maybe we'd earned this. The night was slow and golden, the air thick with the smell of summer and sweet wine. I kept stealing glances at her, laughing with the music teacher, holding her wine glass delicately, her eyes always drifting back to me. And then, near the end of the night, something happened. A slow song came on. It was stupidly cliché, something soft, something about second chances and silver linings. But she looked at me and tilted her head. "Dance with me," she said. "In front of everyone?" She smiled. "They already know." I took her hand, and we stepped out under the string lights, into the center of the makeshift dance floor. Her arms wrapped around my neck, mine settled on her waist. We moved slowly, deliberately, like we were trying to memorize each other. Around us, no one spoke. They watched, sure, but not with judgment. With something like understanding. "I haven't danced in years," she whispered. "Me neither. Feels nice." It does. Halfway through the song, she rested her head against my chest. And just like that, the world faded away. Later, as we stood outside waiting for the car, I slipped my hand into hers and said, "You ever think we were supposed to meet like this?" She looked at me for a long time. "I think we were supposed to fall apart first, so we'd know what to build." I kissed her. Softly. Slowly. No urgency anymore. Just certainty. The new school year began with that familiar buzz, fresh notebooks, stiff backpacks, and the faint smell of anxiety mixed with hallway deodorant. But this time, it felt different. This time, I wasn't pretending. I walked into the building with Claire beside me. Not hiding. Not sneaking. Not watching over our shoulders. We pulled into the parking lot together. She smiled at me across the console, reached for my hand, and for a moment, neither of us moved. It wasn't nerves. It was reverence. Like we both knew we were stepping into a new version of our lives. We'd moved in together 2 months earlier. A small place just outside of town, nothing extravagant, but filled with light and quiet and the smell of shared coffee in the mornings. Her sketchbooks were scattered on the kitchen table. My guitar lived on the couch more often than its stand. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And God, did that matter. The first time we slept there, really slept there, I woke to the sound of her humming in the kitchen. She was barefoot, dancing slowly as she stirred eggs. I just stood there, leaned in the doorway, watching her like she was the sunrise itself. She noticed me after a minute, smiled over her shoulder. "We're really doing this, huh?" "Looks like it," I said, crossing the kitchen and kissing the back of her neck. And we did. The house became a home. Slowly, quietly. We built it piece by piece, framed photos, lazy Sunday brunches, music drifting through the rooms on rainy afternoons. We healed in that space. Now, standing in front of the teacher mailboxes again, surrounded by the chatter of new hires and returning staff, I could feel the shift. Not just in me, in how people looked at us. There was no more tension, no whispered speculation, just familiarity. We weren't the scandal anymore. We were just together. "Look," Claire said, pointing to the staff bulletin board where the list of homerooms had been posted. "You're next to me again." "Fate," I smiled. She bumped her shoulder into mine. Or maybe Rayburn just likes the symmetry. Rayburn had changed toward us, too. There was a time when he wouldn't even meet my eyes, when he warned me not to bring drama into the building. But at the end of last year, he pulled me into his office, folded his hands, and said simply, "You handled it with more integrity than I expected. Don't give me a reason to regret believing in you." I hadn't. I wouldn't. Later that afternoon, during the staff orientation meeting, I found myself looking around at the sea of familiar faces. Some smiled. Some waved. Some looked away, but not with malice, just discomfort that no longer belonged to me. Claire caught me staring into space. "What's going on in that head of yours?" she whispered, nudging my arm with her elbow. "I was just thinking," I said, leaning in, "how strange it is to feel happy again." She looked at me for a long second. "Not strange," she said. "Just overdue." That night, we walked through the neighborhood near our new place, hand in hand, as cicadas hummed overhead and the sky melted into soft purple. She told me about the new projects she was planning for her art students. I told her about a new elective I was designing, history through film. She smiled wide. "Finally doing the nerdy class you always wanted, huh?" "Finally," I laughed. When we got home, we curled up on the couch, her head on my chest, my fingers absent-mindedly tracing the edge of her collarbone. "We went through hell," I said. "Yeah," she murmured. "But look where we came out." We were quiet for a while. Then she whispered, almost like she didn't want to break the moment, "You still think about her?" I didn't lie. "Sometimes." "Me too," she said. "Not with longing. Just remembering who we used to be." I kissed the top of her head. "I like who we are now a hell of a lot more." She smiled against my chest. "Me too." The school year would come with challenges. The stares might never fully stop. The scars would always be there, small, invisible reminders of how it all fell apart before it came together. But we had each other now. Not out of desperation. Not out of retaliation. But because in the wreckage, we found something real. And for the first time in a long, long while, life felt like it belonged to us again.